Well, hi everybody, and welcome once again to Impi, the friendly catamaran sailing around the world. Today we want to share our departure from New Caledonia and the passage to New Zealand. Before we get too much into the New Zealand chapter of our travels, let me say that we still have many videos to share with you of New Caledonia, so you can expect to see those along the way. Where else in the world does one have friendly turtles cruise right up to the boat all day long? Well, none so much as we have experienced right here in New Caledonia. Anyway, it is time to start checking through the rigging to make sure that Impi is fit and able and capable for the crossing down to New Zealand. So here's the thing, we are quite the sticklers when it comes to checking through our rigging and of course through all the systems on board Impi. We are almost fanatical about safety and preventative maintenance, and in spite of a cautious and thorough investigation to our rig, decided to call the experts to do a second inspection. We wanted a second opinion. The experts duly arrived and decided the rig required a tune-up. Who am I to argue, so we agreed. One of the things these guys did was to remove the turnbuckle to the starboard side of Impi, after which it was replaced and locked down with its lock nut. I'd observed a debate going on between the two lads sitting at the turnbuckle, but they assured me all was okay. It transpired later on that in fact not all was okay. In fact, on replacement of the fittings, the guys had actually cross-threaded the bolt you see in the middle of the picture to the shaft section, which also affects the ability of the lock nut to perform its function. This would prove to be an issue during our trip down to New Zealand. It would also result in us having to motor part of the way. And so, one would think after sailing 2/3 of the way around the world, that I would have known better to always check and inspect the work of others on board Impi. This is something I now vow to do in the future. Well, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning, and the winds are pretty strong, but we are headed for New Zealand today, here from New Caledonia, and so this is the start of our journey there. An early morning start was in order. On account of the southeast winds, we wanted to get as broad an angle as possible from New Caledonia down to New Zealand. As is the case on this crossing, the angles are tight, and we were prepared for an uncomfortable trip, sailing close to the wind. All advice we got from the weather gurus in the know for this region suggested we would almost with certainty have to encounter at least one storm or front on our passage to New Zealand. The trick, they say, is to choose which storm you want to tackle, and best to take it on before 35 degrees south, which would be toward the start of this journey. Sailing on the inside of the lagoon toward Amadi Island, it was clear to us that the wind was erratic and ranging anywhere from 18 to 32 knots, and although it does not appear this way on video, the seas were forecast at 3 meters with closely spaced swells. Already at this point of our journey, we realized that the angles to Australia would place the entire system to our aft quarter, which would make the journey more comfortable for us. However, we decided to persevere and kept New Zealand in sight.
Hey sailor! Yeah, we're on our way to New Zealand, man, and it's crazy weather. Banging and bashing upwind, close to the wind, and it's not pleasant.
Weather is something to take very seriously when sailing to New Zealand. Here high pressure and low pressure systems move from west to east. The green line, running from north to south, is a direct line, called the Rum Line, between New Caledonia and New Zealand. It is the route one would want to take if the weather permits. Right, now I am no artist, folks, so don't look too closely at this diagram of mine, huh? I am sure this will give a very basic idea of what we were looking at in order to time our departure with regards to weather. Now, of course, there are so many more factors that one would need to share here, and I just don't have the time for it. But essentially these are the basics that get one started with regard to jumping to New Zealand. In this region, moving from west to east, these high pressure systems in the southern hemisphere rotate counterclockwise, anti-clockwise, as seen in red on this diagram. As a result, wind generated from this rotation shifts from a westerly quarter at the south side of the system, becoming southwest, southerly ahead of the system, southeast towards the upper side, an easterly flow at the north side, dropping back to northeast, north and northwest as one comes back to the bottom of the southern side. Now, of course, low pressure systems do the opposite. They rotate clockwise, and as a result, winds follow the opposite direction to high pressure systems. I don't have enough time in this video to go into everything, so I'm going to stick with high pressure systems right here. So the local weather gurus advise us that since these high pressure systems move rapidly from west to east, one typically wants to encounter the wind shift in the first high pressure system at no lower than 30 degrees south. Now another important factor is to take a look at the actual pressure in these systems. If a system is in place at 1030 hectopascals or more, then departure should be delayed as gale force winds will be evident. With this all in mind, we opted for a high pressure system just under 1030 hectopascals and timed it for a rendezvous at 30 degrees south. Now ideally, we would have wanted to leave on a high pressure system at around 1027 hectopascals, but since there was a deep low developing over the Solomons, we feared it would drop south and delay our departure by many weeks. So we departed, timing a rendezvous with a high pressure system at 30 degrees south, leaving now in strong southeasterly winds. The center of a high pressure system marked in green here has little to variable winds and is a zone where one uses the engines to motor through. Of course, as one high pressure system moves past toward the east, the winds shift northeast, north, northwest and west, allowing one to sail back toward the rum line, having lost ground to the west on account of the strong southeasterlies. The following high pressure system approaches, and due to one's position down the line, it is hoped that we can sail into New Zealand on the winds ahead of it, being winds from the west. Weather gurus warn us that if we arrive as the high pressure system is at New Zealand, that these fronts can be followed by nasty northwest and southwest winds with terrible seas. So it is important to time one's arrival to not coincide with that of a front. Yes, so here we are, here's Impi, and we are going upwind in southeasterly winds at the beginning of our journey. The sea state is running at about 3 meters, and I've mentioned this on videos before. It is not easy to capture sea state. We are trying to get heading against the wind here, as close to the wind as possible, and you can see the Genoa is reefed to second reef.
Yeah, sailing to weather on a cat, and it's bumpy. I have to go down there again. The petrol's lying over.
Yeah, although we had tied down the petrol cans, they were coming adrift in the rough conditions, necessitating me to move forward and retie them. If my voice sounds scuffy on this video, it's probably because I'm recovering from a severe cold.
It's wet, man.
The further south we proceeded, the colder it became. I remember thinking to myself at one stage that we had wasted good money on foul weather gear. However, down here where all becomes freezing cold, we thanked ourselves time and time again for having invested into these warm clothes.
Oh yeah. Well, here we are. The first day is pretty rough. Getting down to New Zealand, just leaving New Caledonia here. And yeah, you know, I mean, the winds are running at about 30-35 knots, but it's not as bad as when we left Vanuatu. It's just uncomfortable, you know. It's nothing dangerous about this, but just very uncomfortable at the moment. The seas are rather lumpy.
So here begins a whole new story. During the night, we were taken unexpectedly by a severe squall. This resulted in some minor damage to our mainsail, our genoa car, and a snag in the genoa itself. In the dark of night and in rolling seas, Anna had to hoist me up the forestay in the bosun's chair in order to secure the genoa. This was quite a terrifying experience, as you can imagine. However, I managed to successfully sort out the problem, and thanks to Anna, made a safe landing on deck, albeit a very wet one. This further prompted me to run around and check the rigging, where I noticed the lock nut and turnbuckles on our starboard shroud almost completely adrift. Of course, it is not a great feeling for one, as this is one of the shrouds which keeps the mast in place on the boat. So, in a harness strapped to the side and ploughing through waves, I used a flashlight to survey the problem. And what I discovered was of no comfort to me at all, for it became apparent that the threaded section of the turnbuckle had been stripped when the riggers in New Caledonia had reassembled it. I managed with 2 pairs of shifting spanners to get the bolted section turned in deep enough to grip any remaining thread that may have been in place, and then strap the shroud down with a rope, preventing it from spinning loose and as added support to the horn skeleton. Just prior to departure, I had also gashed my hand open and was in hospital for stitches. And now, with all the emergency work, the wound had split wide open. Fortunately, we carry super glue on board, and Anna was able to glue the wound back together again. All efforts to reach 35 South on approaching high was now abandoned, as we simply limped along on engines with the sails reefed into the max. Now we needed additional diesel, and that was the next issue.
Right, so we've taken on some damage to our rigging in a very heavy squall that came across us last night, and we're running low on diesel, so we've hailed a ship to come and assist us. So they're on their way, and we need them to give us about 120 litres of diesel. We believe there's some strong winds coming up, and we just want to be safe. And the captain has very kindly said no worries, he's coming alongside us to give us some diesel, so if we do have further complications with our rigging, we know we've got a safety stop. Thanks to Anna who radioed in there.
It's always at times like these, and unfortunately our GoPro battery is not cooperating. We need a new camera. This means we cannot video the entire event, However, Anna uses the iPad to capture some of our rendezvous experience with a cargo ship at sea.
So what's happening, friend?
Medina, Impi.
Yes, I go ahead.
We have the fenders on our yacht on the port side. Are we going to have to run alongside you, or do we need to put the fenders on the other side? Over.
You will need to come alongside. So anytime you can come to me, it's no problem.
Okay, so you will be stationary.
I'll just stop somewhere around here and then you can come alongside me.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now once again, the video footage at sea makes all look calm and sedate. However, there is a swell running here, and nothing could have prepared us for the amount of turbulence and current that we would encounter as we came alongside this massive sheet of steel at sea. That bulb at the base in front of the ship, which breaks the waves coloured in red there, was surprisingly every bit as high as Impi, if not twice as high. And although one does not see it as such here, it is breaking water ahead of the ship.
Thanks, guys. Hey, you are stars, eh? We sailed all the way from South Africa. You're the best people we met.
Have a pleasant trip.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Standing by?
Yes, sir.
There are no words to describe these moments being alongside a large ship at sea. Let me try to explain some of the details if I can. One thing we had discussed with the ship's engineer was the possibility of floating the drums at sea. He was not keen to do this, as he said they would have to tie the drums together with rope, and he did not want these ropes near his rudder gear. The second thing we needed to do was to get the fenders on the same side of Impi, as would place both vessels pointed in the right direction. The ship's captain tried to position his ship in such a way as to place Impi downwind of the weather system and also the sea state. In other words, on a leeward shore, as it were. I think further to this, let me read what I wrote and posted on Facebook on our arrival in New Zealand, not long after we experienced this. I think it summarizes what actually happened. Okay, so I start the whole Facebook thing with an explanation of pretty much where we have got up to this point. And then I follow on with our encounter with the ship, which I now wish to read. And it reads as follows. And here starts another whole story. Diesel. We were in trouble and required the continuous use of our engines to manage the precarious mast situation. However, we were not sure we would have enough diesel for the journey, given that we had planned to sail the route. Anna and I discussed the situation and wondered if we should turn around or divert our route to Australia instead, as this would place the wind from astern. As we were discussing our options, we noticed a large cargo ship called Medina passing not far from us. We saw this on our AIS instrumentation, something we believe every sailing vessel should carry. I looked at Anna and said, we should call that vessel and ask if they have diesel for us, perhaps some ice cream and champagne too. Before I knew it, Anna was on the VHF calling the operator. Medina, Medina, Medina. This is Impi, Impi, Impi. Over. I started considering how on earth I was going to get the diesel drums on board Impi from a cargo ship in these type seas. The seas had calmed somewhat, but there was quite a swell and current running in the vicinity. Impi, Impi, Impi. This is Medina. How can we help you? Was the reply. Medina, thank you for responding. We are a sailing vessel bound for Opua in New Zealand. We were taken by a violent squall and sustained damage to our rig, necessitating the use of our engines. We wonder if at all possible you could assist us with some diesel. Over. Impi, Roger, Roger, we receive you. How much diesel do you require? Anna looked over at me and I said, ask him for 150 litres. That will get us there. Medina, we require 150 litres. Over. The concerned operator hesitated a while, then said, Impi, you stand by 1 second, please. I will check with the captain. Well, moments went by and he returned. Impi, the captain says we must provide you with 200 litres. We need to maneuver the ship to your direction, and it will take a while for us to come to a stop. At this point, Anna handed the VHF to me. Thank you, Medina, I replied. Could you advise how much money we need to prepare as payment to you? It's okay, he replied. No need. I called him again. Medina, I think I misunderstood you. Could you please repeat? No need, Impi. It is for us a pleasure to provide you with the diesel. The captain says you are not to be charged. We will provide 8 plastic containers with diesel, 25 litres each. We will need to lower them to your deck. We have not done this before, so we need to figure this out along the way. So I got back to the operator, saying we would place fenders down the side of the boat, and we would pull alongside. Oh boy, I am not sure how many sailors out there have pulled up alongside a cargo ship in the ocean to do a transfer of goods. But let me assure you that the task was going to be more difficult by far than I had imagined. The first mistake I made was to assume the ship was completely at rest when in fact it was still moving steadily. I looked at the bullnose, which sits in the water ahead of the ship's bow to break the waves. Just that piece of the ship alone seemed twice the size of Impi. And then I attempted to come alongside. I felt Impi being sucked towards the stern in a violent current. I hit both engines at full throttle and feared we had not enough power to pull free. It frightened me as I looked back and saw the rush of water which pulls around the stern. The back of the ship rises up out of the water at an angle, and one can see part of the rudder gear there. I feared we would be swept under the overhang, kept the throttles full ahead, and then veered off and successfully away from the ship. I spoke with the operator. I think your ship is not at standstill, but he said to try again. I asked if he would move the diesel in his crew forward of amidship, as this would give me more room to work within the strong current being forced down alongside its side. He agreed. The entire crew moved forward. They had cameras and were taking videos. Would love to get my hands on those. Anyway, Anna positioned herself. All fenders were in place as protection to our sides as we came against this huge wall of steel. I looked up and saw the men up there. They seemed so small and far away at such height. Finally, I managed to make contact. The swell running down the side of the ship was up to 3 meters. It felt insane. Up 3 meters, down 3 meters, and so it continued. The fenders were scrunching and squealing, and we thought they would burst any minute. Working hard on the throttles, I managed to keep Impi against the wall of steel, allowed the fenders to knock us off a meter or two before bringing her again for another run. And so it went on until I managed to find a rhythm that worked. I looked up at the operator, signaled the now sign to him, and the first barrel of diesel descended toward Anna, standing on Impi below. Watch out, I yelled. Stand to one side. If that drum falls, I was interrupted. Understood, she yelled back. At our position against this wall of steel, I could see these lines painted down the side. They measure the ship's depth when loaded from the surface of the water. Watch these as a background to Anna standing on the deck. Up, up and up the numbers raced past her little body, and then down, down and down again. Impi in the meanwhile would come against and then bounce off. I struggled with the motors, fighting to keep things as steady as possible. I feared for Anna standing there at the shrouds, stood there clinging at the position where the ship's sides engaged. Not only engaged, but raced up rapidly at around 3 meters before descending again. It was as if we were in an action movie or something. It just did not feel real to us. Anyway, Anna reached out and pulled at the rope holding the diesel just as Impi started climbing the next swell, pulled the drum inward as the very skilled crew above dropped just enough rope to provide the necessary slack for the drum to reach the deck. Anna, falling back, sat on her butt as she swiftly worked at untying the knot. Yes, we had the first drum on board. And so it went on. 8 drums in all. I was so proud of her. What an amazing job she did as she tackled these drums to the deck in what I can only describe as being a dramatic and frightening experience. As we left the ship's side, the captain congratulated us on our seamanship. We rather congratulated them for their exceptional skill in line handling and in the manner in which they managed the drums to our decks. Not one drum had reached us with impact. Every drum had been pulled across by Anna and lowered in an exceptional fashion to the deck. I was seriously impressed. We even tried to give them a bottle of whiskey, but they declined. I managed to provide our details to them. Google Catamaran Impi, I said, and they all agreed, waving as we left with our 200 extra litres of diesel on board. Yes, we felt so relieved to have the spare diesel on board. Not only were we happy to have it for ourselves, we were also happy to be able to be in a position to assist our friends who sailed close by and too were concerned about their diesel. And this brings us to another point. Sailing with friends. I remember in shock and dismay whilst crossing an ocean once, where we left together with a number of friends. At one point, we turned Impi back to be in the proximity of friends who sailed as a family on board their catamaran. "Why did you come back?" they asked me. "Well, to sail in proximity of you," I replied. Anyway, we got the feeling that out there it just became a race, trying to see which boat would reach its destination first. For us, on Impi, we decided after that to just do our own thing really. We are cruisers. But here, sailing with the likes of our friends on SV Shenanigans, we discovered what true friendship is all about. We used our AIS device to monitor each other's progress, to remain within VHF contact with each other, to show the necessary care. For one, if Impi lost its rig, it sure was nice to know we had friends an hour or so away. Or, if they ran dry on diesel, we were just a call away too. And so the value of sailing with another boat in our proximity became a real treasure to us again, something we had given up on from previous experiences. Now I am never sure if perhaps my footage is boring folks on account of being too long and mundane. However, so many people have written to me and asked me to keep the camera rolling, for what may seem ordinary to me is not ordinary for others, they say. So at the risk of being boring here, I will allow the camera to roll as we sail with the rising sun. For folks who feel this is of no interest to them, now would be a good time to hit the stop button. But for those who have the time, sit back and relax and take in the birth of a new day at sea as we sail toward New Zealand. And so another day and night follows yet another. And finally, after 7 days at sea, Impi enters the morning of her arrival. It has been a longer than usual passage for us. What started out as fast and promising soon became slow and erring to the side of caution. This is the sea. This is the weather. This is the respected commands. And in its beauty and tranquility, there lies a hidden power.
Really cold here. So we've arrived in the Bay of Islands in New Zealand, and we're gonna check in at a little place called Opua, and we've been given the go-ahead to proceed up the channel to the Q dock, customs dock. So let's take a look at this bay. We've got our customs flag, the Q flag flying there, so hopefully they see that. And that's the Bay of Islands. but it's cold. It's really cold. But yeah, beautiful. A very nice place to arrive in New Zealand. I think we're going to be in for a good stay. And perhaps we need to start hauling out some of our warm clothes again. So we'll check that out.
Hold on.
Now it was time to arrive at the customs dock in Opua. We had been told by many cruisers and locals alike to avoid Opua as the officials here, very official. However, we found them to be incredibly friendly. They take the biosecurity very seriously here in New Zealand, but then again one understands this too. We lost most of our food to the biosecurity officer, who explained that they had to prevent bugs from entering the country, and whilst we explained it is necessary always for a yacht at sea to carry extra food, point in case, had we lost the rig, we may have been floundering for weeks on end at sea. Food is a safety feature on yachts, and planning on arriving with no food could be a matter of life or death in the wrong situation. Still, they explained that it is not a crime to arrive with food. However, most foods are taken, steamed, and then frozen before being buried. Here they do not even incinerate foods due to smoke emissions. The officials took their time to explain why this is so, and I must say that they are incredibly polite, respectful, and very welcoming to us. New Zealand, we look forward to visiting your beautiful shores.